Do you ever want to bang your laptop on the desk, crack it in half, and slam it into the dumpster? Maybe it keeps freezing, crashing, gives you a spinning wheel of death, starts to slow down like a snail, the fan is way too loud, or the screen won't turn on. I've had my fair share of computer problems, and even though I'm in a better place with my current one, sometimes these things make me want to give up. That's why I decided to go DAWless. Here, I have the Akai Pro Force, and I must say, it blew my mind. I am your girl July from Kickback Couture, and if you want to be an insider, follow my personal Instagram account to see what I'm working on before YouTube does. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? I plugged it up, turned it on, opened a blank project, and started pressing random buttons because I didn't know what I was doing. My goal was to make 2 different types of beats to determine if I would even keep the thing. A classic 808 driven hip hop trap beat and a boom bap sample beat. While working on the trap beat, I could seamlessly create melodic patterns thanks to the note layout options. I also discovered the ability to plug in a separate MIDI controller to the back of the Force in case I wanted to play keys rather than pads. While picking through the presets and samples for this beat, I stumbled upon 2 things. The first was splice integration. I could sync my entire splice account by connecting the Force to Wi-Fi. Second was not only were there samples I could choose from, but also onboard plugins that enabled me to tailor the sound to my taste and make them from scratch myself. I wasn't expecting this much flexibility. When I first learned about MPCs, I thought everything was sample-based. Seeing an oscillator got my creative juices flowing like crazy. But check this out. There were also effect plugins in the device that you can use as inserts or sends in the onboard mixer. Taking things a step further, the Akai Pro Force has a suite of plugins for mastering. So not only do you have reverb, chorus, delays, sidechain, compression, and halftime, but also a limiter, maximizer, and modulation effects among a bunch of others. Continuing with my trap beat, I loaded up custom drums via the SD card slot and programmed some bouncy patterns with hi-hat rolls and snare rolls like Lex Luger did back in the day. At last, the drum rack I created was complete. I added the final touches in the submix where I could level and affect the drums individually. Somewhere in between perfecting the kick and snare patterns, I added a Spins 808 sample. It pitched perfectly across the pads, and adding rolls was incredibly simple as the octave notes are highlighted green and there's an ARP function. Akai Pro Force is similar to push or Launchpad controllers considering the launch features for scenes and clips. I used it to arrange my scenes and recorded them into the arrangement view from there. Lastly, I saved and exported my track. The most appealing options for me were the wave stems, but I also noted that I could export the project as an Ableton Live session file and use my dusty computer if I wanted to. This brings us to challenge number 2, the boom bap beat. I had to stay true to my roots for this, but within reason, not that kind of reason. There are inputs on the back of the Force that will allow me to sample a vinyl record directly. As a side note, this is next to the XLR inputs that you could use for microphones or guitars and MIDI inputs and outputs. I did use my vinyl player to get some fly chops in my fly beat machine, but I ran into some issues. I would change the tempo of the beat and then the rhythm of the sample wouldn't match. I couldn't figure out how to time stretch. To make matters worse, I couldn't figure out how to chop the samples. Once I finally figured out that part, I couldn't get the chops to show up in the respective track. After trashing sample after sample, I decided to take a step back and watch some YouTube tutorials. So shout out to my favorite YouTuber, Av McCree. It took me about 3 or 4 hours to understand the basic workflow of the Force. I watched video tutorials, read parts of the manual, and scoured forums for the answers I couldn't find elsewhere. The learning curve would be treacherous without resources, but it was 100% worth it. I picked up on some dope performance features, for example, tape stop and stutters. I finally learned how to time stretch and chop samples. I did a little bit of research for every other task I wanted to accomplish, which makes sense considering that this is all new to me. I also learned how to assign custom parameters to the macro knobs and the crossfader. After the first 2 beats, my workflow got faster and smoother. I felt like I was back on my computer, but without the unfortunate crashes, freezes, and overheating. I completed the challenge, a trap beat and a boom bap beat. And let me tell you, my life will never be the same, but for real. The entire process had me excited from the beginning to the end. Every bit of frustration led to a shot of dopamine once I finally solved the problem. So moving forward, I'll take this standalone setup with me everywhere I go. One suggestion I got from a forum was to put a hard drive in the back for optimal functioning with big projects. The Force can have up to 128 tracks, and sometimes I get cinematic with my production, so no argument here. My hard drive should be in the mail soon, actually. People looking for a mobile solution for music production should look into the Akai Pro Force. People familiar with Ableton's Push or Novation's Launchpad will feel right at home with many of the Force's functions, but people unfamiliar with Push or Launchpad features will still have a blast. I think you might love this workflow. Let me know what you think about the Akai Pro Force and what I should do next in the comments. If you're interested in more standalone production options, check out the video review of Artifon's Orba. This video is not sponsored, I just genuinely love this device. It's all Couture, Kickback, and Cookup. As you can see, the beats that were played during the duration of this video were made with the Akai Pro Force. And once again, this video is not sponsored, but if you click on any of the links in my description, it will support my channel. Love y'all.